Hi, I'm Fernando Fernandez, and we're here on FERNTV, and we have Chris Landreth here. He's got a short animated film called Subconscious Password, and it's showing here at TIFF. And we're excited for him to actually be here and talk to us a little bit about this film. And I guess we're going to start off by asking, was there a time where you were at a social gathering and then you actually forgot someone's name, and then did this inspire this film itself?
Yeah, forgetting a person's name at a party is something that I've become very professional at. And 3 years ago, when I was first starting to get the idea for this film, this was happening like over and over again at various parties.
Right.
It happened to be a year that I was doing a lot of animation festivals, and all the time there'd be people coming up to me, and I'm their best friend,
right,
but I can't remember who they are. And it's always it's always an awkward situation, because one of two things can happen, right? The bad outcome is that the person catches on that you can't quite place who they are, and so they tell you their name.
Right.
And when you do that, it's awful, right? The oxygen leaves the room, and it's like, oh yes, John, nice John, I knew John, right? So, and then after that, it's you can still talk to the person, but it's just not the same, right?
Right, absolutely.
There's this pall that comes down over both of you.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that can happen, which is way better, is that while you're stalling for time and you're asking all these very generic questions,
right,
but not too generic to let on that you don't know who the person is.
Right.
Like it's been, what was it, like 4 years ago that I saw you? And they'll say, no, it was 5 years ago.
Right.
Okay, fair enough, not 4 or 5 years. And you're using that to try to, subconsciously, while you're talking to the person, you're trying to narrow down, okay, who's this person I met 5 years ago? And then you ask another question, so we were in New York, right?
Right.
And they'll say, no, we were in Paris. Okay, Paris 5 years ago. Okay, so your subconscious is hard at work all that time.
Right.
That you're really stalling for time. And as I said, the good thing that can happen is that suddenly, out of all that stuff, the information that you get, suddenly, boom, the name pops in, John, right?
Right.
And for me, it's like a joyful moment,
Right.
like John. Of course, it's John. So it's like for the rest of the night, I'm like John this and John that. Nice to see you, John, and
right,
let me buy you a drink, John, and John, it's such a great moment, right?
Right.
So I wanted to try to put that into a film.
Your film, when you're going through the actual game show, do you think that's it's sort of like an alternative blueprint as to how the brain actually works?
Yeah, I mean, it is an alternative, but it's actually there's some element of reality there,
right?
Because what we tend to do, I am no neurologist, even though I try to play one on film, is that there is a kind of a symbol association thing that happens with a core part of your brain called the limbic system.
Mm-hmm.
And in that limbic system, neural pathways are established to this little gem of a module in your brain called the hippocampus.
Mm-hmm.
And what's kind of understood now is that the hippocampus part of your brain is the long-term memory storage part of your brain. And what you tend to do subconsciously is to throw ideas or throw concepts at your hippocampus,
right,
to try to retrieve from that like the person's name, right? So it struck me 3 years ago when I came up with the idea of the film, as I was in the video store that I was going to a lot. The guy was happening to play old reruns of Password,
right,
the show from the 1960s with Alan Ludden as the host, and special guest stars Betty White and Carol Burnett and Elizabeth Montgomery and Bob Denver from Gilligan.
Right.
And it just kind of, that's sort of what happened when you're trying to remember a person's name. Like I was trying to do at these parties where I failed to get my friend's name.
Right.
And kind of came together at that point. And I wrote 3 or 4 drafts of a script after that, got the National Film Board involved, and in the next 2 years we worked on this film.
What kind of animation is this? If there's a classification for this type of animation, what would that be, or how would you describe it?
I mean, hard to say, because in this film I use a lot of different animation styles. I mean, what I've done over most of my other films is CG, computer animated footage, and here it's a lot of the film is CG, as my other films were, but there's a lot of new stuff I'm trying out. Like there's a technique, very old technique in animation called pixelation, and pixelation is where you have actual real live people actually animate themselves over, like you would animate a stop motion puppet. And that's what myself and John Dilworth, who co-stars in the beginning part, is the guy whose name I can't remember. John and I did pixelation in front of a stereoscopic camera on a soundstage, and then we had that composited into a party scene. But yeah, that actual technique is very old. I use really old, cheesy techniques in a lot of the rest of the film. Like Ayn Rand, for example, is just a really cheap cardboard cut, kind of like a cardboard cutout, except for her face, where we slapped on the live action footage of the actress who played Ayn Rand. Her name is Nancy Pash. We composited her eyes and her mouth onto this face. Really, really bad animation. I don't know if you didn't really grow up in the 60s, of course, but there was a series called Clutch Cargo. More recent one that's a Quebecois animation called Tete Clac. Yeah, we all love Tete Clac, which is that same really, really cheesy technique. So yeah, a lot of what I do in this film compared to what I did in other of my films is very cheap, cheesy stuff.
Well, how do you see the future of 3D animation? And what's your take on it? Do you think it's going to grow exponentially, or is this sort of like a work in progress for other filmmakers or other animators?
Yeah, it is a work in progress. People are still trying to figure out, the language of 3D cinema. For the most part, filmmakers have been using it kind of conservatively. I'm a little concerned that there seems to be a convention growing around the use of 3D, like bringing it in front of the screen as opposed to behind the screen. I think a lot more that can be done with it to bring, what I like about 3D and where I hope it goes is that it brings the film to the audience. And traditionally, at least when you're in a theater, the approach has been more like bringing the audience to the film, right? But I like the idea of an intimacy, like when you look at a close-up, for example. Close-ups are really great with 3D, and it's not used all that much right now. When you do it right, on a 2D projection, a regular 2D projection, a close-up will look like the face is 18 feet high. But in a properly done 3D use of that, you can make that face so that it's 18 inches away. Different thing, different experience. That's what I want to see people explore.
Now, with the National Film Board supporting you with this with this film, can you tell us the support they're giving you, and tell us how good it is for them to back you up on this?
We're in Canada here, and I'm not from Canada originally. I'm from the United States, and I will tell you firsthand that there is no equivalent of the National Film Board in the United States, and for that matter, really anywhere. There are a few countries that have that kind of public support for like auteur kind of filmmakers. Canada is quite unique among them, and for good reason, because we got our neighbors to the south, and there is very much of a need here in this country to establish a cultural voice of its own.
Right.
And I mean, that's where the NFB originally came from. That's where its charter has been, and that's a really good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we do that. So it's amazing to be able to have filmmakers like animators like myself and Theodore Ushev and Monroe Ferguson and other animators be able to do that, to have that to project a kind of voice that you would not be able to get in, say, the United States, and it differentiates Canada culturally in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time here, Chris, and I hope your film does well, and hope to see you again for any upcoming projects.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.